and gals. So sorry. We wanted to go ahead and get started here. We've got a great panel today. We want to talk about red teaming. I've got a series of questions, but let me have the team each introduce themselves. When we going down the line, you already know who I am, so I won't introduce myself. But Ads, why don't we start with you?
Most handsome first. Okay, hey everyone, I'm Ads. I work at Cohere, I'm part of the security team. We're an NLP company based out of Canada. My background is that I actually started as a network engineer, then I became kind of an AppSec child after doing a bit of network pen testing, and now I'm in like this really interesting generative AI space. Yeah.
Good.
Dudley.
Hi, I'm Jason. I work for Salesforce, currently part of the Exploit AI team. My background is grew up as a network admin, Unix admin, then turned into hacker consultant for 12-ish years, and now breaking AI for Salesforce.
Cool, yeah. Ken Huang with the AI generated image. I work for distributed apps.ai. I just running a small consulting firm, mostly doing the red teaming and consulting on the AI strategy, especially with the security. So I wrote a book on generative AI security, recently published. Check out if you want by Sprinkle. Also, I lead, co-chair two working groups with Cloud Security Alliance on the AI. One is the AI Control Working Group, another is the AI Organization Responsibility Working Group. I'm also fortunate enough to be with all the core members of OWASP Top 10 to contribute. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Do we want to gauge a quick the room, people's backgrounds? Like, have we got model developers, CISOs?
Yeah, that's good. So we have the time, right?
We have the time,
so who is the model developer? Cohere. Hey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who breaks models for a living? Yes.
Who is the application security? AppSec. Oh yes, lots of AppSec. Who doing the red teaming? Oh yeah.
The application security people whose companies are embedding generative AI into their application stack.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
People that raise your hand, how many of them are your models versus third party? Your models. Your models.
So if
Third
it's
party.
if it's your model, raise your hand. I don't think it's Cohere. If it's a third-party model, raise your hand. If it's a Hugging Face,
That's third party. Open source, third party, yes.
All right.
that's it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Good.
You people that didn't raise your hands, what do you do? Which is business, CISOs, where are you in the spec?
We didn't.
SecOps managers?
SecOps. Yeah, we didn't have that category. We needed to ask that. So how many SecOps folks do we have? Yep. Then CISOs who are sneaking in? Great. So let's go ahead and start with panel. So I've got a couple of questions that we kind of put together. I'm sure we can start to grow from there. I'll advance to the slides. So you guys have this as a reference. You wanted to have this as a reference in the background because as we start talking about some of these, we might want to point out some of the threat modeling components as we go through the discussion. So,
That's one more question.
Yep.
Who here is here to learn about red teaming, using AI for red teaming purposes? Who here is here to learn about red teaming AI applications and models? Okay, it's a pretty even split. We'll hate on that. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
That helps us frame the reference. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that as the first question that we were talking about was, which fits a good portion of the audience here, is that what are the benefits of Gen AI in red teaming for traditional apps? I think maybe we should split this between traditional and AI apps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for let's talk a little bit about traditional apps. So talk about what are some of the benefits of Gen AI in red teaming for traditional ads?
So sorry, thank you. I mean, the first and foremost, right? Traditional web applications, if we're talking about something like fuzzing, for example, then generative AI allows us to like mass quantify predictive analysis and predictive patterns, which obviously increases our target scope, but may also reduce false positives. Generative AI, in terms of like that predictive analysis, may be able to generate patterns, which then gives us a bit more context. Like traditional application security tools lack, such as scanners and stuff, may lack that contextual information. So that's where generative AI is able to, I guess, enhance that. If you were to use that as a tool to enhance your application security stack. Anything else?
Yeah, I would echo what Ed said. I think it's increase a little bit of automation, especially some actually companies building some agent. The agent not in traditional sense. It's AI agent, so it has a RAG behind it. It has reasoning, planning capability. So eventually, the AI agent could potentially help the traditional applications. And if you're talking about the traditional application app stack, you are talking about the SaaS, the DaaS, the SCA. With generative AI in CI/CD pipeline, you certainly can generate some IAC code, right? And also maybe validate the IAC code with the LLM. You can using multiple LLM, right? So this is all looking in the future, but I see some of the companies already thinking about that and do the POC on this. Yeah, so Jason.
So for me, when I think about how AI can help in red teaming and other pen test OffSec type of stuff, it really falls into two categories, right? One is the reporting side, and it's pretty clear AI can help tremendously with the reporting stuff. So for example, one of the things that our offensive security team at Salesforce has done is built a little tool that goes in and gets all of the bugs that we found from our source records of those bugs, pulls those into a report, and generates context and text to create a really nice polished report, right? So all we have to do now is file bugs. We don't have to go write the report. We've got templates that we built, and we can just run the AI tool. It can go grab this stuff and then generate stuff for us for reporting. So beautiful for that. The testing side is a little more interesting, and that's where, to echo what Ad said, fuzzing. AI is an amazing fuzzer. The other thing that is really kind of fun to do is as you're building tooling to interact with your apps, everybody's got chatbots these days, you can actually just write your own offensive chatbot, right? To have chats with the chatbot you're testing, and then you can just watch the traffic go back and forth, and now I don't have to be sitting there talking to the chatbot. I can let my LLM talk to the chatbot, and I can just watch the traffic as it goes by and note interesting responses. Or I can send those responses to a classifier and say, tell me what's interesting, and let that do some pre-selection out for me.
Yeah, one thing, and thank you, that's a very good point. One thing that I actually forgot to mention, we talk about like autonomous agents as well. So if we like go for like the React method or something like that, we can say like, we can build a generative AI red teaming tool, be like, okay, look for like sources and sinks, potentially in this source code. And then we can then like move on to the next phase, which would then be like generate some payloads to try and attack that.
Taking it back to the red teaming side of things, because red teaming is more than just pen testing apps, right? Red teaming is social engineering, phishing. You've got to go do OSINT. You've got to select your targets well. I did a demo last night as I was just thinking about preparing for this of using the React model. So does everybody know what React model is? When we say those words, it's just reasoning and then acting, right? So you tell the model a goal. It then goes through and says, okay, to get this goal, what are the sub-steps I need to do? And then it goes through and does those things. And then you give it a list of tools that it has to accomplish things. And it says, okay, to do step one, I need to use this tool. To use step two, and then it evaluates the responses, right? So it's basically functions similarly to a human. It goes through and does reasoning. One of the things that I gave it was just a search engine, Google search engine API, and that's the only tool I gave it. And I said, who's the CFO of Google and what is their email address, right? So social engineering, phishing, I want to do whaling, I want to target the CFO. I don't know who they are, I don't have time to do OSINT, so I'm asking the LLM, who's the CFO of Google and what's their email address? It came back through, it showed me the chain of reasoning that it used, and then the final result was just, here is the CFO of Google, and here is their email address. And interestingly, it pulled up 2 email addresses. One of them was an educational.il or state, I'm not sure, address for that person, right? So not only did I get my whaling target, but now I also have a lesser known non-Google email address to contact her at. So it's really useful for kind of like simplifying and just, you've got junior people coming in that need to do red teaming that you're trying to ramp up. Here's a really great way to level them up. And if you turn on verbose mode, you can let the machine explain how to pen test and how to red team, right?
Maybe if I can add a few, it's maybe applied to all the security arena. Is I think 3C. 3C is what Caleb Sima mentioned in the CSA summit. He's the chair of AI safety from Cross Security Alliance. So it's basically coverage. With generative AI, it's really can deal with vast amount of data, so it's increased the coverage. And also context, you need to know who, when, what he did in your network. That's what generative AI can help to find the needle in the haystack, right? That's what the activation function is in the neural network. And then the communication, basically it can generate a report for you. Of course, you need the human in the loop, right? And potentially in the future of the tool, with even the legacy application security tool, it should always have the chat interface for you. So you can ask it, what's my top vulnerabilities in my application, right? What is the top vulnerabilities in the infrastructure? What's in the cloud? And if there's any indication of compromise since the last 24 hours. So that's coming, I think, with generative AI.
How?
Yeah, I think maybe we should move forward with the next question.
Yeah, no,
Otherwise we'll stay here.
No, you're doing great. You know, I was just going to pick up on one of those points, which was the using of generative AI to really upskill new red teamers.
Right.
I think one of the challenges I hear folks is how do you get people at speed? I don't know, people are focused on or have challenges getting your new red teamers up to speed.
Yeah.
So maybe you want to talk a little bit more about kind of your results, maybe, if you have, kind of how that has helped you guys from getting folks up to speed.
Sure. I feel like I've talked a lot. Do you have examples of that as well, Vince?
Not examples per such. I think the rate of adoption. I mean, like generative AI for anyone increases productivity, so it's only natural that it would enhance someone's learning capabilities within a specific topic. I kind of had it like as a note for one of the other questions, but I mean, one of the things about red teaming in general using like generative AI is that if I myself as a red teamer and not like specifically well versed on like a specific domain category, then I can use generative AI to like equip myself with that, and that's how one way you can really scale red teaming as well, right?
Yeah, maybe I can add a quick example. Recently we did a red teaming exercise for a generative AI application in education, in K-12 education. They're trying to generate the curriculum for the K-12, like it's span from even kindergarten like to this senior high school. So we have the junior people in the team. So it's hard. So the way we did is we actually using a RAG platform to ingest all the education code from different state. Different state has different regulation in terms of certain topic can be cheap taught, right? So, for example, California, you have to talk about LGBTQ in the curriculum, and in Florida, you should not, right? So it's then you have to evaluate this course. Like if you say I'm in generate the curriculum for California, I trying to probe this system to see if it generate any good content or adhere to the standard. So this is actually we actually using the framework from the some of model from Hugging Face, adding some from Claude, and also from chat the OpenAI, and generate some questions and mix them together. So using the syntactic prompt or data set to do it. So that really help. And we also put the API and put a rate limit. It help to kind of help the junior developers test.
So for us, one thing we can do, we pair up with more senior people in like a mentorship relationship, right? And so we have them shadow us on projects. And one of the things that you can do as the senior person trying to help somebody level up is just have them articulate to you what the goal is of the assessment. What's the target? And then once they've clearly articulated that to you, have them go ask ChatGPT or whatever model, I'm doing a red team test, blah, 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 here's my objective. What are some things I need to do? And it does a pretty good job generating methodology for you. And if you have your own methodologies internal that you've already developed and your own documentation of tooling that you use on every assessment or the way that you want to structure your calls for social engineering, whatever, use those to build it into, and then now you've got this really nice generic framework that this junior person is able to refer to as they start going through the process. They can bring that back to the more senior person and say, hey, this is what I think we should do, and then you can go through and work with them, iterate on that. Well, this looks good, this is definitely stupid, don't do this, right? That's ignore the LLM, but these are good steps, and you can iterate through that process and help them level up, and now they can see that whole process because you're making the machine show its reasoning, right? So its chain of thought. That helps us develop our chain of thought, and so as a training tool, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and also just echo custom scripting as well, right? I don't know how much you would trust it, or whether you would choose to run code that's generated by generative AI, but also it's fairly easy from a bunch of models to get a script to achieve a certain outcome. Yeah, guys.
Well, that sounds good. So let's flip the script just a little bit, and let's talk about the other half of it, for the other half of the room, which is going after and targeting AI apps using generative AI.
It's fun.
It's fun.
So this is a really interesting space right now, and I have several hot takes that may or may not coincide with other people on the team, because this is still a space where we're still trying to figure out what it means to do this testing, right? What do we care about? So if you were here for some of the earlier talks, you saw some of the evolution of the list, and as we get ready for V2, as things have morphed and changed, it's a space that we're still trying to figure out. So for example, one of the things that we've had to figure out at Salesforce is, as security teams working to exploit models, do we care about hallucinations and bias? No is where we're slowly coming to. We don't. Ethics does, right? There's definitely ethics and ethical implications and humane use implications with LLMs, but those aren't necessarily security risks, except we've said all these years, brand damage is a security problem, right? And that's definitely brand damage. So where does it fit? I don't care if you can convince my LLM to tell you how to build a meth lab. That's not a security risk to me. If you can get my user data out of there, if you can get customer information, if you can get it to perform an action on some other tenant, I care about that, right? That's the risk I care about as somebody trying to exploit AI. So it's really interesting as we're in this formative period where we're trying to figure out, what does this even mean? What do I need to care about? Those answers are unclear.
Yeah, and I think they also they stem from the same kind of problem, right? If we're talking about like sensitive information disclosure, we could be talking prompt injection as like the exploit, right? So we've got prompt injection, but then like Jason said, like myself as a security person, I'm ingredients of napalm is not really a big deal to me, but if it's like downstreaming, chaining like cross-site scripting or things like that, like indirect prompt injection, then that's something that I really personally care about or find interesting.
Yes, so red teaming for generative AI, from my vantage point, I think we need to focus on different aspects. One is data. Data is really data-centric. It's the most important. So you basically say if you can poison data, if you can access data, injection some code. So that's the one part of it is the data. Then the model, right? If you can have access to steal the weight. One of our top 10 is the last one is model theft, but one aspect is you actually steal the whole weight file, right, as a binary or CSV file. And also, if you put into the if you don't have access, it will be distillation attack, right? We discussed about that between as it myself. In this kind of public trust boundary, is the pink side, the model theft could be a distillation attack. So that's a possibility. Distillation attack means it's trying to just probe what your response is and build and training your own model. Eventually you steal it, right? So model is important, and if then you can talking about the downstream applications. Then it's API security, the traditional OWASP top 10 on the application security, and the RAG. RAG is certainly the big attack interface, right? I don't know if we were talking about the RAG in the next question, but yeah, so I will skip it once we talk about that, but just make sure that if you do the RAG, you have to red teaming, pen testing against it. That's many people use it. Lots of people really mess it up, and violation of the access control, violation of least privilege, and no encryption at all. So these are the big problems. But RAG will exist. RAG is really important. So yeah, that's is another attack surface. So if we talk about the red teaming for generative AI application. So just a kind of shameless plug here in my book, Generative AI Security. I talk all this part. So what you need to be careful with. So yeah, from red teaming perspective, that's how you test against it as well.
If we're red teaming our own generative AI applications, I say the word a lot, but it really does mean a lot. Is like contextual and threat models. So like introducing generative AI, like I asked the audience earlier, like introducing into our application stack, like what are we actually adding? Realistically, it is just another layer. We've been doing like, for the past 30 years, we've been doing like foundational network infrastructure controls, like Ken said, rule of least privilege. So majority of the time, if you were to do those, like, let's say hypothetically correct, then the risk of what you're actually introducing is not that significant on top of it.
One other thing, one of the reasons why we wanted this model up there, we talk a lot about shifting left, shifting security left, and it's way more cost effective. That's times a million when it comes to AI, right? So we talk about data poisoning. That all happens in the training phase because at this point we've learned we don't take real-time responses and reincorporate those into training data. We want to filter them first so that we don't end up with TAE, right? So we've learned that now. There's not many use cases currently where things are real-time updating training based on input. So that means in your training environment is where all that's happening, which means the attackers have to shift left to get to that stage. That also means security has to shift left because that's where you can protect against that, right? You need security in there at that training stage, helping vet the data, helping make sure that the processes to go through the training pipeline and then pushing it to production. And then the other side of that is, okay, if you're training on production data, what does your training environment look like? Because you can't treat that as dev because you've got production data in it now. So one of the things that we've slowly come to realize is we have to treat our training environments as production-like if we're training them on production data. Yeah.
Do you see instances of people doing data poisoning through in-context learning? So you provide a few malicious examples.
Yes. So RAG is where I see that a lot, right? Is can somebody do SQL injection into the database that we're using to store documents that we're retrieving, right? That's more to the right and a more realistic data poisoning objective at this point than can I get to the model? Because the models, by the time you've released something in production, you're past the training state. You're not retraining that model. Where you're going to hit it now is with RAG because that's what everybody's doing now. And that's much easier because that's just standard SQL injections, right? That's in some Postgres vector database or Chroma or whatever you're using, Pinecone.
Yeah. So in terms of in-context learning, it's basically you prompt the LLM during this conversational session. Then you can inject some of prompt to make it hallucinate. That's just impact your session. That's not like a RAG. RAG is actually, real-time RAG is increasingly become possible. Although real-time training or fine-tuning is still not there yet, right? But if you really do a real-time RAG, or even without a RAG or vector database, you can using the API, Google Search API, Brave API. One example was React example that Jason talking about is actually using Google API, right? So this is very possible. You can inject the poisoning data in RAG pipeline or data pipeline. So it's important. I just want to echo what Jason said. It's the security operation pipeline, or now people talking about MLSecOps and or LLM SecOps. That's a pipeline. You have shifted to left. Basically, your data poison, the data training environment is your production environment. So that's very important. How you get the data also, right? You do have the data provenance. There is a correlation called the C2PA. That is more for the copyright, but it's also for the security, right? C2PA means correlation of data provenance. I don't know if you guys heard of it. It's by Facebook or Google. They also part of it. C2PA. Yeah, I forgot what it is, but that's what it is. A content provenance association. Correlation for content provenance association. Now it's coming, it's activated, okay?
There you go. How do you, is this on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, just like Jason said, shifting left towards the data, like data lineage is like, especially if you're developing models, is one of like the most critical thing. Like, are you sanitizing, scrubbing data? Where is it coming from? Do you trust it? Because it doesn't matter how rigorous all the rest of your controls are. If your data is poisoned, you're kind of almost game over at that point. And it's like a needle in a haystack situation to even pull it out, if it's even possible. Like, I don't know if anyone saw, I think it was like Llama 2, was it? That's like trained on, I don't know where it came from, but it's got all the Harry Potter books in it from J.K. Rowling, which is all copyright. So like, if you're building an enterprise, like you can't use that. So kind of an example. It wasn't poison per se, but just an example.
And the other side of that is, I always feel like it's not on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
It's just enough reinforcement so people can hear
Right,
you.
yeah.
But yeah.
So the other side of that too is, going back to the cost prohibitive, if that data gets poisoned, right now, teaching an LLM to forget something is an unsolved problem. It's being actively researched, and there's been movement to get there, but it's not currently a solved problem. So you can't get an LLM to forget something, which has a lot of interesting implications, especially for you higher level or governance types folks, right? So GDPR, right to forget, if you train an LLM with my data and I send you a please remove my data, you have two problems. One is you don't have a way to remove me from the LLM without retraining that LLM and spending a month of A1000 GPUs to do that. Secondly, even if you do remove me, prove it, because it's stochastic data. So the 10 times you've requested my name, maybe it doesn't show up, but bingo, number 11, and there's my name again. Prove it.
Yeah, like what was it, like 2 years ago? It was like 63% of all application security vulnerabilities are basically caused by reintroduction like code at some later point. So how do you regression test that? Like, I don't know if that's even possible, or how do you scale that? I mean, kind of wormholing, but you get the idea. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So taking just in your comment, so if all the foundational models, they have been trained with public data, and there is so much garbage in the internet, and all those attacks are there. Now, can we trust any of those models out of the models?
Not all foundation models are trained on public data, though.
Yeah, there are, but a lot of.
Oh, there are. Yeah, sorry, not all of them.
Yeah. So, and then now, when we are using the output of it, so can we trust the output of? Because now it could be like it has been trained with SQL injection from the public internet.
Yeah, so this is actually our the top two, right? Our large language model top two. It's called insecure output. Whatever from the foundation model, it's insecure. You should not trust it. So that's why we need to put a mitigation strategy to validate the output. There is a certain open source tool like Guardrail or LLM Guard, Protect AI, they provide this. And there's a lot, Rebuff. There's open source tool to validate your output from your large language model. Precisely because you cannot trust it. So, training on the public data, and some of those data certainly can be even have the indirect prompt injection, right? Right, indirect prompt injection partly is coming from your training data. I don't know if you guys heard about prompt injection. One is you just directly as a hacker to prompt with the language model to have it review some secret or something like behavior differently. Another way is you don't actually direct prompt it, and actually it's using kind of RAG framework or whatever React, right? It can get from either training data or from the search API, right? And then it behave differently. So, yeah, you want to add?
I think as well, like vetting the model where it came from. If you're familiar with stuff like model cards, give transparency about whoever's the model provider will state like where the training data has come from. Like Ken said, you've got LlamaGuard. A lot of companies do their own in-house tooling or use a combination of both. And then I don't know if anyone's familiar with Lakira as an example. They have the Pint or Pint, I was calling it until yesterday, which kind of then evaluates those controls as well, which are pretty good. All this is kind of security in layers, but yeah.
Just shifting back to the RAG, just wanted to get your thoughts on this. So the RAG databases, as we discussed, are very critical. Is there a possibility of sort of, very critically tamper-proof, for example, ledger databases, Amazon QLDB, right, quantum ledger databases, which essentially it's kind of a database, but also an strong audit log. So it's basically defense in depth, making it more secure.
That doesn't protect you from poisoning, it just lets you prove that you have been poisoned. Right, so.
It's just more, yeah.
So I think, I have lots of thoughts. The way to secure RAG applications is traditional AppSec because it's just a database, right? Whatever your document repository is, secure that. Whatever your database is, secure that. That's your data poisoning primary injection point as a red teamer, right? If I want to attack your model, if I want to get you to do something dangerous, the way that I get to your model isn't to go hack your model, which is probably on some back-end production thing that I'm not going to be able to easily get to. The way for me to do that, if you've got RAG, which is what the current hotness is I go attack these less secure applications. So where is your RAG document store coming from? Oh, it's coming from Confluence. It's coming from whatever wiki you've got set up internally for help desk documentation, right? So, okay, can I go inject content there? Probably. Can I inject content into Jenkins? Probably. And then now that's getting incorporated into your RAG database and becomes part of your LLM pipeline. And now I'm able to impact your backend AI. I don't know if that answered your question.
So I was just thinking, like, you can build some additional protection to ledger databases. Like,
Right. So maybe let me repeat your question. So Amazon has a ledger database, which is actually kind of using type of blockchain technology, right? And called quantum ledger, whatever database it's called. So it's really used for the data integrity, right? But like Jason said, it does not prevent you from the data poisoning. But it really, whatever, it's non-repudiation. Whatever data there, you have the record, you have the hash, right? So, but in certain cases, if integrity is important for your data, yes, by all means, using this ledger database. But from what the AI perspective, especially from training perspective, we are more focused on the data poisoning. That's maybe the huge risk. Data integrity, maybe if the data source and the accuracy is important. In certain cases, it is, right? Then you can leverage blockchain. In my another book, Beyond AI, actually, we talk about that, right? So sorry, I always coming back to my book, but this is precisely some topic in the book. It's also published the last year. Yeah. So go ahead.
It's not so much like red teaming, just to kind of go back, but if we're talking about if you are a model developer or training models, it's not very widely adopted, I've seen, but data version control, so at a very high level in comparison, when you have an SDLC, we're talking about code, right? When we're talking about data version control for machine learning, we're talking about the data and the actual model. So if you're doing if you're talking about shifting left into the actual training phase, then theoretically, as long as you're performing that rigorous testing, you could effectively try to roll back to earlier versions of a model or data, which again, just kind of a mitigation layer. But I quite like that topic.
Data poisoning, you're right. I mean, data poisoning is a big problem. Maybe you should think about
Data poisoning comes from a lot of different avenues. I don't know if anyone's familiar with split view data poisoning or front running. So a lot of models are trained on public internet. They're just scrapes of archive, which is just a dump of the internet at a certain phase. You can edit Wikipedia sites without any approval. But again, this is such small scale, and likelihood of you affecting your own model as well as others, it's not really prevalent. So, like Jason said, I think that's the primary risk in our current landscape for poisoning.
So I think I changed my mind a little bit. Where I think quantum ledger comes into play is going back to the concept of you have to get super far left to affect that training, and nobody's doing real-time training. What they're doing, though, is taking their document stores and retraining. So if you've injected into the RAG data store that's now going to be slurped up and used for fine-tuning a model, now you've got poisoning. Ledger can help you with that problem, right? It can let you see where is a known good state of my data that I can use for training that hasn't been poisoned in the database over here. So we tend to focus on, can I poison the model? It's not really the model at this point that you want to poison. It's the data that's getting sucked into the model.
Yeah.
So
Can a red team identify the data quality problem? Data quality problem.
So when you say data quality problem, what do you mean?
It's like a training data, or validation data, data sets quality.
Right. What about it?
The red team results can see which data.
Which data set it is?
You're right. Which data are introduced to low quality.
Yes. Through the same benchmarks that LLM model developers use, right, to test the quality.
Yes.
This has been the hardest challenge for me, right, because I've got a long security background, but I don't have an ML background at all, or a computer science background. So this has been the hardest hurdle for me, is kind of leveling up. And I deal with data scientists all day long that can just think circles around me when it comes to the math and things involved, right? And so that's my huge hurdle. But as an attacker, I have the ability to control which data set I'm calling when I write my Python script, right? So that's giving Hugging Face, for example. I could say, use the training data validation set, use the whatever other, right? So I know I can evaluate those each individually and then look at the output of the benchmarks and say, okay, this really sucked when I used training. It did much better when I used validation.
Yeah. What? Yeah.
There's also, I'd say, the most popular open source tooling I've seen is like model serialization attacks, which is kind of alluding to what you were saying. You know, like there's a Garak, which is written by Leo, who's part of our OWASP team. Protect AI did one recently. So if you're talking about like, you know, hate to say the word, but jailbreaks.
Yeah.
Then that's where the most common open source, you know, text attack is quite a good one as well.
It's lights.
Yeah, so the question is like, maybe we should repeat the question sometime, right? So the question is, how do you test the data poisoning or data quality? There is data-centric, we are moving from model-centric to data-centric. So your question is good. That's why the pipeline is very important. You need the data pipeline and to make sure you shift to left. So in order for you to actually testing, red teaming it, you basically have to look at the training. It's a fast loop, right? Training, and then you see if anything behave not good, you need to go back to data, not just focus on the model itself. So that's the current strategy. That's why the ML SecOps is becoming important.
I think this actually is a nice segue to the next question.
which is really looking at what are the similarities or differences between the two, between AI red teaming for traditional apps and PX systems.
So for me, I've already mentioned about stochastic data and the fact that you can't get the same output every time, right? You ask the same question the exact same way with the exact same parameters and you get different answers every single time. So you have a number of problems as a tester. One is, how do I get a repeatable step that I can give to a developer that they can then go use to validate whether this finding is real or not? And then on the development side, how do I make a fix and then test it and prove that it's been fixed, right? There's a lot of problems and we don't really have a good answer. This is where the big difference is. If I'm SQL injecting something into a regular application, I know there's SQL on the back end. If I type SQL into my input field and I get a SQL database response back, I know I've got SQL injection. For an LLM, if I've got prompt injection and I type in SQL and you send back SQL code, it's all made up crap because you just hallucinated it, and I don't know if that's actually SQL database code from the production app or if it's just a hallucination until I go a next step. I've got to do something else, which is go to the code. I'm slowly coming to form the opinion that black box testing on LLMs is useless in a lot of ways because you have to go to that next step of, how do I know if this is training data? How do I know if this is the system prompt that you're leaking to me? I don't unless I go to the source code and look at the system prompt. I don't unless I go to the database.
So is this breaking the SDLC? as we've kind of thought about it historically?
I think so, and the more I do this, the more that just becomes apparent to me. And I think industry's slowly starting to realize that and catch up. I'm ahead of the curve because I'm so cool now. But I really do think that as people start doing this more and more, that realization is spreading.
Yeah, in terms of the SDLC kind of DevSecOps pipeline, like traditionally you use SAST, SCA, right? Dust, REST. That will not work with generative AI. If you do the software component analysis, the traditional tool, I think Jeff Log is here, right? will say, we do not scan the model, so, right? We do not scan the data. That's not part of software component analysis. In terms of the SAST tool, Sneak, you can talk with Sneak or Checkmarx, Fortify. They said that for now, we don't check anything in your data, anything in your model, right? So the SAST, the DAST, and the SCA will not be the same. So I think we to gradually shift away or not. We still need, for traditional legacy application, we still need this pipeline, right? SCA, SAS, DAST, REST, IAST if you want to add more. But with generative AI, we have to rethink about that. How can we actually do the model scanning, the data scanning, the RAG, especially the RAG, we're talking about that. This is not in the current tool. Sneak don't have it, Checkmark don't have it. Even the Dust tool maybe it's right, it's a black box, it's maybe okay. But all the SAST tools, they have not get to this level yet. So we will see some new tool, protect AI, for example, right? It's LLM SecOps. They have a very good podcast. If you guys interested, maybe also listen to their podcast. They actually have some tool to inject, trying to secure your pipeline, right? That's what they call the ML SecOps, right? You have the operation. So you have the model scanning. It's kind of a SCA for the, right? But so far there's not really data scanning. That could be potentially could be the future, right? If you guys thinking about a new tool, maybe data scanning is a good tool.
So do you have anything to add there, Ads?
No. Cool.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, please.
So is there a really like a point where they said like the same input once per time, they end up giving different outputs? So how do you know you've done enough for it?
That's a current question on my answer. So to repeat the question is, how do you know you've done enough red teaming if every time you send an input, you get a different response back? That's currently, there's no standard for that right now. We don't know. We just picked a random number. It basically, in the Exploit AI team, so I guess let me back up one. The Exploit AI team at Salesforce is 3 people. We focus specifically, so Salesforce is kind of positioned in a cool way because we both make and release foundation models closed and open source, and we also consume. So I get to see both sides of the equation, right? The Exploit AI team is a small 3-man team that's full stack focused on tools that consume our models, right? And so we've had to reach out to research, we've had to reach out to ethics, legal. I want to come back to that. To answer your question, one of the first questions we had to come up with as a team was the answer of how much is enough, and we just picked 10. We're just like, if we can get it to repeat it 10 times, then it's probably real. But even then, it comes back down to we don't know until we go back to the developers and work with them and say, hey, we think we're getting your system prompt out when we give it this. We've done it 10 times. Here's the steps we've taken. We work with them. But then they have to go back and either give us access to the code or work with us, right? There's now a deeper collaboration that needs to happen. And I think this gets back to the difference of what's different now and breaking SDLC. You're including partners that you haven't before in the SDLC because generative AI is doing 2 things with risk. It's making it go up the stack and down the stack. And so a lot of risk now is managed in contracts and legal arrangements, right? So you don't know what OpenAI's training data is, back to your point of, can I trust the data? Maybe. You don't know. OpenAI hasn't told us what their training data is. You can't see it. So how do you know if you've got injection on OpenAI? You don't, because you can't see the training data, which means your security control is now the legal contract that you have with OpenAI, right? And that's a new shift in security. We've always had legal, it's always been there, but now it's a critical part of the stack.
Here, like, is the stop and stick approach. This kind of generative AI models, the output, it's a big probability, and then the probability is the next token of the probability, and obviously, like, the input prompt affects the probability. But in some sense, it can come to the deterministic level at some point, because it is a probability. Yeah. So now we have, because you bring up the point that that you get different output completely from different injection, like same injection, so the rate-limiting output is different if it's hard. So if there are things changing here, because I see that technically it's possible, because it's a probability, deterministic probability. Hey, I think is there something happening in the field to solve this problem?
I've definitely got an answer, but I want to ask you to go first.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to, tack on that. Red teaming is a continuous development. So whilst there is a scope for red team engagement, I think you should always come back and it's not like you do a pen test and then you've like, yeah, I've got SQL injection, and then, oh yeah, it's fixed, cool, we do one next year, see in 12 months. In terms of like, I think it really comes down to the data. Like if you find an email address, then like if you were the model provider, then that might be a bit easy to find in your training data or reason to that. But if you're doing like cat at COS like 10 times, like I don't think that's ever really probable of actually even confirming if that ever was true. I don't know how you'd even go down that route. So coming down to, I guess, the data. Sorry, Jason.
Yeah, I think there's two things can augment that. One is really human in the loop. You do need the kind of white box thing. Also, red team is a black box, but you have kind of a purple team or a blue team help, right? To do the human in the loop evaluation of if it's actually a successful red teaming outcome. That's one. Another one is currently there is a lot of research being done actually in terms of using LLM to evaluate LLM output. And you can have a multiple agent. There is research say multiple agent, if they evaluate each other, the output is much better than just single agent. So at least you have these two possibilities. Of course, it's very important. Like go back to the example I just used in terms of educational AI system. We do need the expert, actually the teacher, actually to validate if that's a red teaming, the false positive or the actual positive, right? We cannot really remove human in this whole thing because of what you said, non-deterministic or probability characteristics of LLM.
So my answer is, I think your question touches on a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and I'm super jaded, which is we're doing it wrong. And we're using generative AI the wrong ways. We want LLMs to be databases, and they're not. And we're trying to force them into a database role, and that's not what it's for. And your question of, can I ever get to the point where I've got this exact precise and I know that it was a successful, is no, because that's not what it does. It makes crap up. That's what they're for. So if you're doing something with it that isn't utilizing the fact that it makes crap up, then you're doing it wrong. That's not what it's for.
So we had some ideas around talking about, we've already been talking about we can talk about some techniques, both some simple techniques and some more complex techniques. Are there anything else? I know we talked about, wanting to talk a little bit more about RAG, React.
I think sorry, I lost track of the questions and those ones, but In terms of like actual red teaming as well, we never actually talked about like augmenting and actually like building data sets. If we're going to talk about like malware generation, phishing, then red teaming, if we are, you know, a black hat, so to speak. I don't know if anyone saw the published paper from OpenAI about like their threat intelligence operations. It was really good. It talked about how they've observed from the like, you know, observability, how nation state actors and APTs are predominantly using their services, which was like super insightful. I recommend you actually give that a read if you haven't.
So we talked about a lot of aspects here. So and the impact on the broken SLTC. So how's it going to really impact, or thoughts on impacting Gen AI in or influencing security operations? How's that going to really impact?
So, so if we're talking like a traditional blue team, malware, EDR, IDS, IPS has been doing it, you know, for a while at small scale, but the enhancement of frontier models not only reduces false positives, but increases the amount of data that we can analyze and the amount of samples. We could, you know, from a blue team, that allows us to scale as well if, you know, if resource is constrained.
That's
I mean, for me, the simple answer is it's a force multiplier. Right? So it allows you to, all this tons and tons and tons of data that you have that nobody has time to sift through. LLMs have time to sift through. They can do that, right? The problem is you get things that are really, really good at summarizing things. You just can't trust them necessarily when they, so you have to go back and verify, right? Again, it's shifting, I said before, it's shifting up and down the stack. This is the down the stack part, right? You've got to go to the next level down. You can't just get an alert that an LLM sent you that says, hey, I was looking through all this stuff and I summarized it, and here's this attack, because it could be making it up, right? So now you've got to go to another step, but your another step is more productive, right? It's more productive to vet that alert and find out it was a hallucination than it is to send a team of 10 people to go through 10 terabytes of data to try to find that event, right? So it's a more productive force multiplier. The other thing that I think is going to shift is, because we don't have, I send you SQL and I get SQL back and I know that I've accomplished my attack, how do I determine if attacks work? With LLMs. It's LLMs all the way down when you start going into red teaming for AI. And you're using LLMs to generate the attacks, or using LLMs to evaluate the attack success, and then come back with a summary and write the report, right? It's just LLMs all the way down. That's going to be a shift. A lot of the tooling is going to be around how do we get our LLM to generate useful attack scenarios? How do we formulate prompts that allow it to, as it goes through the truth? So one of the things we built internally is a tree of thoughts attack, where we've got a judge LLM and then an attacking LLM and then the target LLM, right? And so the attacker LLM, we give it a goal. We say, I want to get system command prompt, go. And then it creates an idea of how to get a system command prompt. How can I do that? Well, I can run uname-a, and then it sends that request to the LLM and says, please run uname-a, gets a response, sends the response to the judge. Judge says, yeah, this looks like maybe it gets close to the goal, but not really. And then it comes up with, try sending it a different request doing this instead, right? So it's making suggestions on how to improve. TLDR, LLMs all the way down.
Yeah, so generative AI certainly will shift the security operation. That's no-brainer, right? It's not happening yet, I have to say, but it will happen in terms of incident response, in terms of threat hunting, in terms of red teaming, in terms of application security. If you want to take a certificate, there's EC Council has a certificate, 6 hours. Generative AI security for cybersecurity professional. Do a Google search and do a certificate, and you know how can that help you on the on your daily job as a cybersecurity professional. So yeah, it's EC console course. It's me, I'm the instructor. Just self-plug again. So yeah, but I think you certainly will benefit from it. See all these different prompts that you can use, and how do you use it in your daily work. Certainly, yeah, I wish you can take a look at least.
Yeah, throw intelligence as well, right? How much easier is it to ask ChatGPT who the CEO of Google is compared to spending 20 minutes Google docking? Sorry, so do you have a question?
It's a different topic. I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, and so we've got one more question after this one. So if you want to take his question, we can.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I appreciate your research.
For Capstone, do research on securing SLMs, and I just want to get your perspective on any nuanced differences for a small language model that employing in red teaming O's, if any. But I think there is some channel securing. The idea is like restores curates.
Yeah, so I'm just starting to broach into this because we're starting to look at like mobile, LLM for mobile type of thing. So I don't have a whole lot of practical experience yet, but immediately the first thing that comes to mind is context is going to be a key thing, right? So you're going to have a much smaller context on a small language model. I think it's going to be interesting to see the hallucination effect on a smaller language because it's not trained on as much. So I think the hallucinations will be easier to spot and less.
Yeah, I personally don't have any experience as well. I apologize, but like Jason said, I think it's context, and I think your attempts will have to be more sophisticated. So like your attempt, like zero shot is, I would say, is definitely not a no-go. Definitely a no-go. So you have to be, I guess, more creative. And at that point, I would employ as diverse red team expertise as possible, right? Application security engineers, machine learning engineers, academics, researchers. That's how I try to. So.
I just real quick brainstorm and then I'll give it to you, Ken. So we talk a lot about like denial of service attacks. So it'd be really interesting. LLMs are super compute intensive. Like I can imagine if it's on a mobile device, it probably wouldn't be hard to just throw it something that makes it spin and then all of a sudden the battery's like super hot and burning people. That'd be kind of a fun.
Yeah, like glitch tokens, to throw a few glitch tokens.
Yeah, small model, I think it's especially with edge computing, you will have AI phone, AI PC. So those must be small model, right? So small model is also Microsoft actually is really deep into that. They try to provide the small model catalog you can use. But in terms of its security, it's not in the agenda item yet with some security professional. From what I see, is most people still concentrate on the large language model security, right? So yeah.
That's just the boom of the industry right now. Hence why we actually created a list. I mean, like NLP itself, but it only kind of made sense to do a OWASP top 10 for LLMs.
Yeah, for small LLM, right?
You should start a project.
Yeah, especially for in the future, robot. Robot, I think, will be the next wave. Once this wave finish, next wave is robot. Yeah, robot, the AI humanoid robot. It will become the mainstream. It will using the small model. Right, so that's the next wave actually. If you look at the figure AI, and you look at the Boston Dynamics, and you look at the DeepMind, they are building this humanoid robot, and they're using this large language model in a kind of quantization, using low rank adapter, right, to put it into the robot, and then it will do the reasoning. There is an example actually. You can let it watch the video of cooking the egg. Yeah. After 10 minutes, it can cooking the egg for you. So this is really promising. It's actually just started this year, 2024. The people putting the large language model into the robot. It's before it's not, but it's already see phenomenal kind of learning capabilities from the small model, whatever you call it. It's actually, small model is more like a large language model quantized, or also freezing some of the parameters, and then in the inference time, just put it into the model, right? So it's making it smaller in terms of parameters, and it's also shrinking from 32-bit to 4-bit. So it's called quantization. Then it's run. But in terms of security, I think it could be a OWASP top 10 for the small model as well. Yeah.
So we got 4 minutes left to talk about.
Sorry.
To talk about. No, that's cool. That's great. Oh, you want to add one more thing?
No.
All right. It's just to talk about how to scale red teaming. So you can kind of all weave that all together there.
Okay, sorry, I said this earlier. Scaling red teaming, I really think, thank you, really comes at getting a dynamic and diverse approach. It relies a lot on context. It's not all traditionally heavily relies on application security. That's definitely one. Internal hackathons, bug bounties, penetration tests, all the standard stuff we've kind of been doing. I do see a lot of benefit with hackathons, both internal and external.
Any thoughts?
Yes, so in order for you to scale, first you need automation. Automation actually, the LLM can generate some of code for you. Of course, you have to validate it, like maybe multiple round trip to make it work. And I think it's very important is also the awareness training. The developer need to know also, or model builders, data scientists, otherwise it's really hard to scale. And you do need to actually have a security program, a process and procedure in place in terms of when and how red team should be engaged. Always thinking about shift to left. So yeah, I think this is some tip I have.
Jason? Yep.
So I think I've already said LLMs all the way down. One of the things that the Exploit AI team that I'm on realized very quickly is with a company mandate that every product will have generative AI, 3-people team is not going to cut it, right, for a company of the size of Salesforce. So we are focused right now mainly on building out tooling to support the processes that you mentioned, right? Because that's the only way to scale. Is we've got to build tooling that will allow us to use LLM to do this testing, so that we can build it into the pipeline. And that way, as the developers are building the code, they can have an LLM evaluate their code, and they build their simple API that talks to the model. We've conformed to a standard spec, right? So it's, again, up and down the stack. We've got to shift everything in so that now developers, as they're building models and as they're building tooling, they're conforming to a consistent spec so that our tooling to test it can know how to call it, right? I kind of meandered a little bit, but build tooling and then distribute it widely is the only way to scale.
Yeah, I think both manual and automated are required, depending on the context. Like Jason said, use the incredible technology to its advantage, especially if you're a resource constraint. And also think sometimes, specific vendors may come in handy. It depends on the scope of your red teaming activity. But if you're looking for like domain expertise in a specific category, then you might not always have that in-house. So that's where you may look for that externally.
Yeah, well, one of the open source tooling, I'm not pushing for sale or look at, but one of the open source tooling that we use actually for one of our exercise, it's called a deep eval. I don't know, yeah, that's quite good. You can kind of plug in different matrix into it, and then you can run for it. You can take a look. That can help scaling. Of course, you have to generate the synthetic data, right? That you using large language model to generate for you. Of course, you validate it. That also helps to scale. You do need some of manual process. Human in the loop is still important. That's the part which is hard to scale, of course, with 3 people, even the Salesforce is such a big organization. I think you guys will scale to 30 people. So eventually, one thing I certainly deep in my thinking is generative AI will impact all the vertical applications. It starts with internal business application. It starts with internal, right? And then you B2B. Eventually, it's consumer face. Although we have the OpenAI has ChatGPT is consumer based, but we don't see a lot, right? But eventually, it's all the enterprise. They start with internal business applications. Once it's good, they will work with the partner to have the B2B, and then it's all good. Then they make security right, all this PCI DSS, HIPAA compliant. Then they will open to the consumer. So all the workflow process, all the business application will help to be reinvented by the generative AI. So if you are in security, you certainly need to get certified by OWASP. Thank you.
Okay.
Good questions.
Last thing for, if you guys have anything, last thing, we'll be around to answer questions too. I want to wrap up the panel so we get kind of the next, so hold your question, you'll probably get an answer to it.
I feel like I really quickly have to say, just to be clear, my 3-person team is not all of the Salesforce security team that's focusing on AI. We have a very specific targeted mission within Salesforce. There is a much broader security organization, all of which is focused on AI.
Right.
I think
That's good connection.
I think Ken is inviting himself into your team.
All right, well, I want to thank the panel here for being up here. And
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
we'll be around for questions. So if you want to ask questions, then of the panel, we could be, the core team's going to be around for questions.